The class was talking to Bush Vernon, and we were asking him for advice, and he said, "Don't be afraid to screw up." So that's what we're all going to be thinking right now. In an essay entitled "How to Win the Culture War" by Peter Craig, he outlined his essay with 3 simple points. We are at war, who is our enemy, and how do we win? Though some might say truth is not the subject of war, they are mistaken. The progression of culture has created people who walk blindly, grasping for the first thing that comes to them. This means there are fewer people set free and really know what truth is. Our enemy is not false ideas, hatred, or crime. Instead, it is the absences of truth, love, and justice. We will never become those qualities if we are only focused on their negative counterparts. Finally, how is one to win this war for truth? An individual must act upon what they know to be true and share it with those who live in absence of truth. It should be remembered that the pursuit of truth is a collective project. People should discuss what they know to be true. One may be incorrect, but through conversation, truth will unquestionably show itself. Truth is to understand the times, know what to do, and act upon it. What really exists, and what is it like? These are the questions that live inside the hearts of men. Who am I, and what is my purpose? To learn the answers of these questions, I must first learn how to think. Not just to think, but how to think. This will determine how I understand justice, and will change the way I view life. Unfortunately, many people don't know that there are right and wrong ways of thinking. Our educational worldview has shown us the changes in how culture is thought over the centuries. For instance, prior to the 1700s, the common method of thinking was Aristotelian scholasticism. This form of thinking relied heavily on reason and intellect. During the 1700s, Francis Bacon introduced a new way of thinking called modernism. He also produced a work called The New Organon. This book outlined the way Bacon believed people should think. It relied heavily on objects and science. And now the world thinks a whole different way. The world will always be changing the way it thinks, but we are not held to the standards of the world, because we have been shown how to think, and truth has been revealed to us through both reason and revelation. Revelation is the only way one can see truth in its entirety. The action of revelation is when truth is uncovered by means of the supernatural. Thankfully, the ultimate truth, God, has revealed His written word to us, sharing truth about Himself and the world around us. God answers all the questions because He is the creator of all there is to question. And since we know how to think and reason, and truth has been revealed to us, we are called to a higher standard. Our task is to go beyond what we know to be true and contemplate what it is that we do not know. With no end in sight, all we can do is press in and seek truth. Mars Hill wasn't made so I can get a diploma saying I completed an education. It was founded so that I can fulfill my purpose. It is here so that I can learn how to think, learn how the world works, and understand my place there. Students of Mars Hill, it's time to realize that I am wearing a dress up here. But more importantly than that, it's time to understand who we are and what our purpose is. It's time to stand and realize we are the men and women of God. Now go and seek truth.
What Plato, Homer, Milton, Dostoevsky, and Dickens all share in common is their discussion on justice. In the Republic, Plato gives us the most infamous discussion of justice of all times, where we get 2 definitions. The first is gaining justice of your soul by aligning the 3 portions, reason, spirit, and passion. Plato discovered this by coming to the conclusion that men are driven by one of these 3 things. If driven by reason, a man will become overpowered by his intellect. If driven by spirit, a man will become prideful, boasting in his courage. If driven by passion, a man will become gluttonous and greedy. A just man balances the 3 and uses each aspect of his soul to fulfill his place. This brings us to Plato's second definition of justice, which is knowing your place and giving yourself to it. It takes reason, spirit, and passion in order to know your place and fulfill your role. Homer, Milton, Dostoevsky, and Dickens finished this discussion by showing how justice manifests itself in the hearts of men. To show one example in The Tale of Two Cities, Dickens demonstrates this kind of justice in his character, Sidney Carton. Carton begins as a drunkard, but as the story goes on, something changes in him. Carton is captivated by the goodness and purity of another, and that causes him to change how he lives. In the end, Carton breaks the law, deceives the government, and dies in the place of an innocent man. Carton attains justice by understanding that he must die so others can live. It is not enough for his reason to direct him to this decision that he must die, but he needed courage and passion to follow through with it. He must put aside his drunkenness and put aside his hatred and die so another can live, and that was justice. Understanding his role and ultimately fulfilling it made him just and brought justice to those around him. We can see that the injustice in the soul of men throughout all mankind has been an underlying cause to the fall of cities. From the fall of Troy to the fall of Rome to the French and Bolshevik Revolution, the injustice in the hearts of men has been present. To elucidate a few, the fall of Troy sprung from one man robbing another man of his wife. This began the Trojan War, which ultimately led to the destruction of Troy. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia is summed up in a quote by Solzhenitsyn. He said, "While I was still a child, I recall hearing a number of old people offering explanation for why the great disaster had befallen Russia. Men have forgotten God. That is why all this has happened." Since then, I have spent, 50 years working on our history of the revolution. But if I were asked today to formulate as concisely as possible the cause of the ruinous revolution that swallowed up some 60 million of our people, I could not put it more accurately than to repeat, men have forgotten God. That is why all this has happened. Through all this, we can see how this idea of justice has worked in all men through all cultures. That brings us to today. How do we live justly? How do we overcome our passions? How do we know our place in our city? All these questions have been and will be struggled with for time to come. Though as Christians, we can celebrate because God is building a truly just city that will not fall. Jesus has come, and we are now able to live free from our passions, walking in the same justice that drove Sidney Carton to the guillotine on behalf of another, and the same justice that drove Jesus Christ to the cross on behalf of us all.
At the start of the school year, we had a conversation with Mr. Henderson about Plato's Republic and how in order to be one in tune with God's will, we must have our soul in balance. Just as Jacqueline said, this means our reason, spirit, and passions must be in harmony. One can't override the others. And as my fellow classmate Luke Henderson so quaintly puts it, Plato might not be our model, but we sure can model Plato. You can, however, tell that You can't tell, however, that Plato understood the cry of man's heart before Christ had come. A common theme in the literature we've read throughout the years at Mars Hill dealt with characters failing to keep their soul in balance. Plato writes in the Republic, "The passion that rules within drives him to the extremes of anarchy and lawlessness, controlling the man like a tyrant controls a city. It will urge him on to every kind of audacity in order to produce sustenance for himself and his clamorous compassions." This quote is a perfect interpretation that if people seek their own passions, they come to a place of misery, hardship, and turmoil. I began to notice more and more how hard characters fall when they didn't have their soul in balance. From our readings this year, the character who exemplifies this best is the father in the Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky creates a shameful character in the father, who is fully driven by his passions for women, alcohol, and money. Because the father is ruled by his passions, he is blind to everyone and everything around him, resulting in his murder. When we read Dostoevsky, Mr. Henderson encouraged us to look at the characters and find ourselves in them. By looking at the father's life, I realized, like the father, I sometimes allow my passions to control me. In order to control our passions, though, we must learn to maintain self-control. Colossians 3:5 says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, and evil desires." A few verses prior to that says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, and not on things that are on the earth." Like Jesus, the youngest Karamazov, Alyosha, put all of his passions aside for the greater purpose of the kingdom. Though he was tempted and had opportunities to indulge in the things on earth, he kept his eyes on the things above. As I continue my journey in life, my desire is to continue this path. The same path Alyosha took, the same path Jesus took. I want my life to be in the light, to be the salt of the earth. I want to put aside my own passions so my soul can be in balance as Alyosha's was.
Our vision at Mars Hill is to grapple with real-life issues, understand the problem, and come up with answers for ourselves, personally, and then communicate those to the world. It doesn't take a genius to identify the problem. People divorce, people kill each other, nations go to war. The answer is simple, and the answer is love. Unfortunately, true love is lost in the confusing mass of personally defined self-interest. I want to share with you what true love is. The answer to every personal problem in society's ills is to reclaim the true understanding of love and then treat each other accordingly. As Luke said, societies become confused because they cloud truth. So we must begin by first understanding how we come to truth. Once we do that, then we can determine what true love really is. Through reading Plato, we have learned that society's ills are reflections of its citizens. This leads to the understanding that the solution of societal ills must begin with the hearts of the citizens. Once the hearts of the citizens know truth and love, then it can be seen through that culture, and that culture will lead to paradise. As Zosima's brother said, life is paradise, and we are all in paradise, but we do not want to know it. And if we did want to know it, tomorrow there would be paradise the world over. So my definition of love does not come from my own opinion, fallen logic, or self-interest. It comes from reason, shared experience, and revelation. The first half of the definition of actively loving someone, love in its truest form, is laying one's life down for others, giving one's self, one's body, one's mind, and one's worldly possessions so that others may flourish, whether that be through charity, volunteering, or anything else with the eminent goal of them living out a virtuous life. In A Tale of Two Cities, when Carton says, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest than I go to than I have ever known." He is sacrificing himself so that Darnay will live. Self-sacrifice is the greatest form of love. Another example of self-sacrifice is in the death of Ivan Ilyich. When Ivan is in bed in pain and is unable to move, his servant Garrison spent many hours every day holding Ivan's legs on his shoulders so that the pain in Ivan's abdomen subsides. Through Garrison, Ivan realizes how much of a burden he is being to his family and accepts that he must die, and in the end, he sees love. For if you know that you are loved, you will feel it in your heart. This leads me to the second half of what love is, which is enacting these forms of love so that people being loved know that they are being loved to the point where they will love others as one has loved them. This is why you must first know what love is in order to love others. Because if you don't love others with the true form of love, they will go out and do what you have done to them.
Active love is a harsh and fearful thing compared with love in dreams. Love in dreams thirsts for immediate action, quickly performed, and with everyone watching. Indeed, it will go so far as the giving even of one's life, provided it does not take long, but is soon over, as on stage, and everyone is looking on and praising. Whereas active love is labor and perseverance, and for some people perhaps, a whole science. In Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, Father Zosima reveals to Alyosha that it is not through immediate action, but through work and perseverance that we fully love. The love that Zosima and Alyosha show is unconditional. Peter Kraft, a modern philosopher and apologist, writes that love's object is always the concrete individual, not some abstraction called humanity. Love of humanity is easy, because humanity does not surprise you with inconvenient demands. You never find humanity on your doorstep, stinking and begging. Yet Alyosha loves all those around him individually. His father, Fyodor Pavlovich, remarks that Alyosha alone does not judge him for his wicked ways. Similarly, Alyosha, who struggles with his own temptations, loves his profligate brother Mitya, his doubting brother Ivan, a low woman, a silly girl, and a bunch of rowdy schoolboys. Some, like Fyodor and Mitya, are the stinking, while others, such as Grushenka and Ivan, are those unknowingly begging for reassurance and love. Alyosha loves all of them out of the abundance revealed to him by his elder Zosima and ultimately by Christ. His love for each brings them to a place where they must embrace or reject the love offered to them. Ivan only comes to love individual people after experiencing great trials. By the end of the novel, Ivan may have glimpsed the necessity of the all-encompassing love of Zosima, Alyosha, and the God he has doubted when he picks up a freezing peasant and carries him home on his back. Each individual comes to some such realization by the end of the novel. Dostoevsky does not reveal whether they will fully embrace this self-sacrificial love, but it is clear that having been moved by love, they must respond one way or the other. So we must also respond. We have been loved, and so we must love. We cannot love humanity in general, but we must love people specifically. We experience this when a mentor or a friend touches our lives, as Alyosha did with a quiet love, fueled by love of Christ. My mentors have inspired me most, not by giving me advice or by doing great things, but by loving Christ and by loving me as I am. Loving words, compassion, and a faithful life, even more than great deeds, have a profound effect on all of us. Small acts which we might disregard as insignificant details shape our lives, and likewise our actions impact others in ways we cannot always fathom. Many sermons or seminars could not have prepared me to give myself to others as much as seeing one woman give herself to Christ. Peter Craig writes again, there cannot be a button to push for sanctity any more than for love. For sanctity is simply love, loving God with all your soul, mind, and strength. And how do you love? You just do it. A cause cannot produce an effect greater than itself, and nothing in the world is greater than sanctity, nothing greater than love. It is not easy, but we are called to this love.
Society distorts the meaning and definition of love. Zoe and Thomas define love, and that definition lies at the root of heroism. The timeless pursuit of heroism, from the ancient Greek heroes to the stories of Robin Hood to the modern-day Avengers, was summed up correctly in a quote by Arthur Ashe, the world #1 tennis player in 1968. Mr. Ashe said, "True heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost. It is the urge to serve others at whatever cost." People have always longed for heroes because they have always longed to be loved. In ancient times, people made gods for themselves as a substitute for the love they couldn't find. The gods were their heroes, but these heroes were not truly heroes. In the classical literature, heroes surpassed others and founded cities and nations at whatever cost. In 10th grade, we read Virgil's Aeneid about Aeneas, a man destined by the gods to found the city of Rome. At the end of the story, Aeneas founds the city, but only after much warfare and bloodshed. Aeneas' ultimate motivation to found Rome was for his own glory and self-satisfaction of fulfilling his fate. This is not true heroism. True heroism is unrelenting, self-sacrificial love. The true hero's motivation is doing what is best for all those around him, rather than his own personal gain. The overflow of the hero's life is the beneficial impact on the life of others around him, whether he sees or does not see the results during his lifetime. Ivan Denisovich learned the true meaning of heroism. This year we read One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Ivan was a prisoner in a Stalinist labor camp. Because of the primitive conditions, prisoners succumbed to hoarding. Ivan was also a selfish prisoner, hoarding and never giving anything without expecting a greater return. He becomes the hero of the story when he gives a piece of bread to his fellow prisoner Alyoshka, because Alyoshka had it. Ivan showed self-sacrificial, heroic love when he gave that piece of bread to Alyoshka and overcame his selfish desire to hoard food and save his own life. Remember, Arthur Ashe said, true heroism is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. One man lived to serve others, and it cost him his life. One man lived the perfect life of self-sacrificial love, and it cost him his life. That life was the life of Jesus Christ, the ultimate hero. He gave up his life for the benefit of all mankind. He gave up his heavenly throne to show mankind how to live a self-sacrificial life. Christ was God and man. We are not God, but we can become a hero. Even someone in the most insignificant circumstances can be a hero. The Stalinist camp prisoner, the mother caring for her children, the Marcel student, and the businessman. Everyone desires to live and make a difference and to be remembered. Everyone can have an effect on the lives of those around them when they die to themselves and their desires, and you show self-sacrificial love to those around them. So I challenge you to become heroes in our society. My classmates and I urge you to remember what truth is, to live justly, to not give way to passions, and to most importantly, love. We challenge you to self-sacrificially love others around you with Christ as your example. You will become a true hero and benefit others around you in a way you never thought imaginable.
Father Finn from Purgatory. That's an inside joke that the seniors, you can ask them about that. Well, I don't think I can improve on the seniors' comments. So what I'd simply like to do is maybe pull a few threads together and tie a knot on some themes that they introduced. At Mars Hill, we talk a lot about changing the world. And talk of changing the world is heady talk. And it has a way of getting a bit grandiose and making us feel quite self-important sometimes. But God has always had his way of grounding us. In fact, he's made it plain that he wants to ground us completely in the ground. He wants to teach us to die so that we can truly live. So allow me to just pull out 3 points from some of what the seniors have shared and some of what they've studied this year and some of what they're beginning to learn about changing the world. The first one is that we must rule ourselves before we can rule the world. It is very tempting to try to change the world before changing yourself. It was G.K. Chesterton's brilliant observation, and when we ask ourselves the question, what is wrong with the world, our first answer should be, I am. And then, of course, there's the old gospel song, it's me, O Lord. It's me, it's me, it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Christianity teaches us that the fundamental thing we have to change is ourselves, to cooperate with God as he works in our lives to conform us to the image of his Son. Philosopher Peter Crave, who many of the seniors have quoted, makes the point this way: what will change the world? All it takes is saints. Can you imagine what 12 Mother Teresas would do for the world? Can you imagine what would happen if just 12 readers of this article or hearers of these speeches offered Christ 100% of their heart and held nothing back, absolutely nothing? He goes on, what is the price? The answer is simple. T.S. Eliot defines the Christian life as a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. The price is everything, 100%. A worse martyrdom than the quick noose or stake, the martyrdom of dying daily, dying to all your desires and plans, including your plans about how to become a saint. A blank check to God, complete submission. May we learn to trust, may we learn from Christ to rule ourselves first and foremost. The second point I'd like to pull is that we need to learn to think small before we think big. It is very tempting to think that the big things happen in other places, that only those big important places can any big things ever happen. Of course, one of the biggest things that ever happened in the history of the world, the Incarnation, happened in the middle of nowhere, in Bethlehem, in a little village, in the remote part of the Roman Empire. So I think we are to learn from Christ in those places where we're to learn to look for Christ in those places where we're not prone to look for him. The most important places are in our homes, in our church, in our immediate neighbors, the ordinary people that we take for granted around us every day. Here's C.S. Lewis. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilization, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. Our charity must be real and costly love, a theme the seniors have mentioned many times. With deep feeling for the sins in spite of which we love the sinner, no mere tolerance or indulgence which parodies love as flippancy, parodies merriment. Next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. Let us learn to tread the holy ground of finding Christ in those small places around us and not rush on to more important places. And the last thread I want to pull is that we are called to love. We are called to learn to love particular people, not in general. Zoe has stolen part of my quote here, so I'm not going to read the whole quote, but she quoted Dostoevsky. Finally, it is tempting to try to change the world without learning to love real, concrete people. There are many who love mankind in general, but are incapable of loving particular people. So Dostoevsky, in another passage close to the one Zoe read, speaks of a man spoke this way: I have often went so far as to think passionately of serving mankind, and it may be would really have gone to the cross for people if it were somehow suddenly necessary, and yet I am incapable of living in the same room with anyone, even for 2 days. This I know from experience. As soon as someone is there close to me, his personality oppresses my self-esteem and restricts my freedom. But this is the very thing we are called to. Of course, God loves mankind, but Christ loved his mother and father, his family, his particular disciples before dying on the cross. We are to learn the same particular love for particular people around us. Ultimately, I think it is those that have changed the world most that gave up their grandiose plans for changing the world and learned these lessons in small places in particular love for particular people. It is only by obeying God in these things and giving up the results to God that they changed and are still changing the world around us. I can put it no better than it was put by the Lord himself. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. May we bring that forth, kind of fruit forth.
Well, I'm going to ask the department if you all will stand over here because we're going to pass out the phones. And I forgot to mention that we have some other teachers here. The teachers, just raise your hand who you are. Thank you for your service this year. Overworked and underpaid. Let me start by saying this. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Lest you think we've started to worship Dostoevsky. I'm trying to count the names. I think Jesus is equal, so let me say it one more time. Equal. Jesus. Now he's ahead. Great job. Thank you all so much for this year. I'm going to give you diplomas and the talk among the teachers. They believe that this is absolutely the best class. William Luke Henderson. Jacqueline Schmoll. Katherine Watts. $17.32. That's the charge. When you all came to Marsdale, you were little more than children. Those who the Apostle John says they knew the Father. You came knowing the Father. You were in a class called Kentucky is My Land, and on the front cover, I don't know if you remember it, but it said this: the Marsdale student was born for such a time as this. He knows God and understands the times. He will be strong and do exploits and serve his generation according to the will of God. You didn't have any idea what it meant at that time. But today, you're what the apostle calls young men. You're strong, you know the word and truth. You're able to overcome the wicked one. You have just shared with us the need to control our passion and to seek truth, justice, and love, and have become heroes. You've learned what the prophet has called good. He's shown the old man what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee, but say with me, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. We received you as children, now we send you off as men and women. I want to read something to you before I get to the job. Ah, children, ah, dear friends, do not be afraid of life. How good life is when you do something good and rightful. So here's the charge. Do good. Do good to your parents first and finally. You have this summer. Don't use it to fulfill your final passions. Let it be the crowning months of your dedication to the first commandment of God with promise. Second, do good to your church. Childhood and graduation, don't extend it through the summer. Talk to your pastor early. Give this summer to serving the needs of your church. Third, and I'll just say it simply, do good to your friends. Finally, don't pursue your passion. Allow God to shape you as a servant who hears the Master's voice, and from this place of service, allow Him to direct your life's calling, and then always do good to the world. We love you, everyone joined in. Many had tears shining in their eyes. Hurrah for Karamazov, Kolya proclaimed ecstatically, and memory eternal. Alyosha added again, with feeling, memory eternal. The boys again joined in. Karamazov, cried Koila, can it really be true, as religion says, that we shall rise from the dead and come to life and see one another again, and everyone and Ilyushka? Certainly we shall rise. Certainly we shall see, and gladly, joyfully tell one another all that has been good. Become our heroes.